Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of NFL Dash. I'm Cody Schoeler here with my co-host Ryan Rue as always, and we're going to be getting into some preseason, just kind of talking about some preseason stuff and a little bit of some off-season extensions a bit later, but we're going to roll straight on into some rookie quarterbacks, kind of looking at what they've been doing. Honestly, really one of the most interesting parts of preseason every year is seeing, these rookies step up and play for the first time, especially the quarterbacks. And there's a big rookie quarterback class this year with those 5 first-round quarterbacks, which are who we are going to be focusing on. So sorry to Davis Mills and Kellen Mond and Sam Ehlinger. Maybe you'll get your
Kyle
time
Trask playing at all? Or?
I have no idea, but Kyle Trask probably doesn't have a chance to start this year. Just going to go out on a limb and say that probably won't beat out Tom Brady, but I assume he's playing because I doubt Brady's going to take a snap. So I'll let you pick where we start. We can start wherever you like. We'll go with your method on this, so go for it.
I think we should get him out of the way now and just say, Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
There's not really a ton of eyes on him right now in the preseason, right? They're all going to be there in week 1. So, with 6 of 9 for 71 yards on the only game he's played thus far. He's actually playing the Saints at 5 o'clock today in less than 2 hours. So, we'll see if he does. Probably, I'm assuming he's going to do probably one drive and then sit for the rest of the game. But 6 of 9 passes, 71 yards. Cool, keep it up. You're on track to being, the next rookie quarterback sensation. So there's not really a ton to say about him during the preseason. One person I definitely want to talk about at least a little bit is Zach Wilson. Considering Zach Wilson kind of has a bit of a indifferent fan base, if you will, on whether or not he's going to be this super electrifying kind of quarterback. But across the 2 games that he's played, across the 2 games he's played, we're looking at 191 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, 15-20 passing. So, no interceptions, which is nice. I don't think he has any rushing stats on here that I'm looking at. I think it's all just been passing. So, the 2 touchdowns came from their most recent game at Green Bay, which, they're not going to be playing their starters for the most part. But just the fact that Zach Wilson's out there getting reps, he's got a 75% completion percentage, no turnovers. Mm-hmm. He's got to find some momentum to push him through into the regular season because we all know the Jets roster, they're not going to carry him by any means. So he's got to come in with a little bit of flair to start off their season, and we'll see how he wraps things up in week 3 if he even does play.
Yeah, and going back to Trevor Lawrence, Trevor Lawrence not in a quarterback battle at all. Number 1 overall pick. That spot is guaranteed to be his, barring really only injury. So smart to kind of not really play him. Just let him learn the offense. Let him kind of develop some chemistry with the receivers and mainly do that in practice. Get some live reps. We'll see what he does today. But if he went out and threw a bunch of interceptions, then he'd be, a story, but he's kind of just doing what we all expected him to do.
Come to think of it, rest in peace to Tim Tebow's tight end career as well. It seems like
the Lawrence to Tim Tebow touchdown was not meant to be. So that's a bad thing going on over for the Jags. But Trevor Lawrence is playing well, Zach Wilson has looked really impressive. This is a guy who we both thought could lead the league in interceptions, and I still don't think that is impossible given the fact that it's preseason, so he's probably not playing against the greatest starters of all time either. But he looks to have a grasp of what he's doing. The Jets kind of offense is not looking too bad at all. He's throwing a Corey Davis who looks like he's playing pretty well. Denzel Mims, Tyler Kroft has 2 touchdowns. So, I think, Zach Wilson's not going to complete 75% of his passes during the entire season, but I think he could be a lot better than people thought he could be. And, the Jets might not be the dumpster fire that we're used to, but this was a guy who it seemed like people either thought he would be really good or thought he was overrated and was going to be terrible. So he's kind of still sitting in the middle there, but I think a lot of people were much more expecting him to fail, already, and he hasn't done that yet. So that's a good sign. We can move on to Trey Lance, who has, when you look at the stats, is not doing great. 5-14, 128 yards. Touchdown was an 80-yard touchdown. That was a good play. it wasn't 80 yards in the air, but he threw it deep and got some run after the catch. But the only the only of those 5 that I wrote down, he was how many times they were sacked. He was sacked 4 times, so the Niners aren't really helping him out much right now. We'll see what he does today. He plays in about an hour here, but the stats don't necessarily tell the whole story. The fact that he's willing to throw it downfield and take risks and try to make big plays is big, because a lot of guys try to play it safe. But yeah, everything isn't out on Trey Lance yet. So I'm not going to take this and say that he's going to suck. But certainly he's not lighting it up. But he didn't even play this last season. He played 1 game, so this was the first time playing football in a really long time. So I think he definitely needs some development.
He needs a little bit of development, and what kind of shocks me from this first game, granted it is preseason, they probably don't want to really throw him into the front lines just yet, but no rushing stats for Trey Lance, and he's really supposed to be a dual kind of threat. Obviously, that's preseason. They're just
I think that's. Coaches like to go very vanilla with play calls in the preseason. Right. They don't want to show anything yet. So they want to save that for week 1. So I think that's part of it. And also just there's no need to run your 3rd overall rookie quarterback on a QB power in the preseason. Right. And have him get injured. But so that is definitely something that, he's not really doing everything that he can because it's just preseason. So that's a good point.
Right. And they have, the quarterback 1 for week 1 is going to be Jimmy G. I think that's almost set in stone.
Yeah. Unless Lance goes crazy this week and next week. But yeah.
But there's no reason to throw Trey Lance into the front lines, like I said, not only because he is your 3rd overall pick, but Garoppolo has had quite a history of injuries. So if you're going to throw out Trey Lance to possibly get injured, and then you're going to have Jimmy G be the quarterback 1 who, let's face it, probably will not play 16 games. They're just being careful with Trey Lance, and I respect that. And that's arguably the quarterback that has the most eyes on him this season, I would say. Not really Trevor Lawrence, because I think we can all agree that he's going to be great. But he will.
The expectations of the team, that's a big thing, because Trevor Lawrence is, the Jags aren't expected to do much. The Jets aren't expected to do much. But Lance is on a team that, as we talked about last week, is favored to win the division. So, that's huge for him.
And but that's kind of the story with the first 3 guys. I have to talk about the person that I'm most excited to see how he really progresses throughout the season, the opportunities he gets. That's Justin Fields. 23 of 39 for 222 yards across 2 games, the 1 passing touchdown. He's throwing the ball, and he's throwing the ball a whole lot. It's just going to be Andy Dalton there for however many weeks. I absolutely love seeing Andy Dalton go out there and throw what was it, like an 80-yard, 70-yard touchdown in
73.
Yeah, against Buffalo, right? So it was great to see him do that play. But Justin Fields is going to be that next guy some part into this season. And I'm really excited to see just how many people he's going to prove wrong. I see Justin Fields as this year's Justin Herbert in terms of rookie quarterbacks that could really overtake the entire demographic there. But it's great to see that he's getting reps, and they're not just, having him on 1 or 2 drives and having him sit. I'm more excited to see where Justin Fields goes. And in terms of Mac Jones, that's a whole lot of yards and a whole lot of completions to not put scores on the board. So, Is he playing smart
Yeah.
per se? There have been dumber quarterbacks in the past to just throw interceptions, right? But well above 50% completion percentage, just no scores yet, and he's most likely not going to start this entire season. So they're just really trying to get the knowledge in him out the gate, I think.
Yeah, but Justin Fields, I mean, like we talked about Trey Lance not running, and we'll see if that changes today. But Justin Fields, has set 79 yards on 9 attempts. He's leading the team in rushing through 2 games, has added a rushing touchdown. So he's showing that, ability of his
that's
game.
right. He did get the rushing touchdown. Just not a passing touchdown, but at least he did get on the –
No, he did
get the passing touchdown, sorry.
Yeah.
So he's got on the board in multiple ways. That's huge.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And, I mean, you look at the numbers. I mean, Andy Dalton, a tiny bit better completion percentage, yards per passing attempt a little bit better. Justin Fields is probably, it looks better and obviously has more to this game. But Andy Dalton, probably gets a few weeks, and then Justin Fields takes over most likely when they feel confident in his ability and where the team is at. But yeah, I mean, he's playing really well. They're really. I don't know if this is a normal thing. I don't pay attention to this every year, but I mean, none of these quarterbacks are really struggling bad. I mean, we'll see what happens if Trey Lance plays really. If Trey Lance has similar statistics today, then maybe you can make a case that he is. But he was the one who came in needing the most, development and time. So that's not really surprising. But yeah, I mean, guys are coming in and showing that they could play. And it's preseason. I think teams are playing backups much more depending on, the team you're playing against. But I mean, Justin Fields, he's looking good. I mean, it's not really surprising to a lot of people. And I think he's taking that chip on his shoulder from, being overlooked by a lot of teams. And I think he's playing pretty well with that. And then the last guy, Mac Jones, slipped all the way to 15th, goes to the Patriots. He actually has the most passing yards out of them all, 1 yard more than Justin Fields. Does not have a touchdown. But, I mean, the Patriots just absolutely routed the Eagles on Thursday, I believe it was, and dominated them. And he's been part of the reason of it. I mean, he's been playing really well. I think he's showing the things that people knew Mac Jones was. He knows how to command an offense. Absolutely. It's what he did at Alabama. He can make the right reads. He can, he can take an RPO and make the right decision on that. And he can, pass very effectively and complete passes when he needs to. I mean, he's 26 of 38. He doesn't have a touchdown, but, I haven't watched every single, I haven't watched their games and watched every single play, but, I know that the Patriots love to, run the ball in, and they've got, a running back that's just on a tear. But, I mean, Mac Jones has looked pretty good, and, I mean, I think he's the guy that people thought could struggle because they thought he was the 5th best, and he was the last one of the 5 drafted. But I mean, he's gone in and he's looked solid, albeit playing against backups, or in that case the Eagles, which I mean isn't much better than a bunch of backups right now. But I mean, he's playing well. This is a guy that I personally like, and I think he could be a really solid NFL quarterback, and he's off to a pretty good start.
It's going to be interesting to see how it goes into the next regular season, considering that I can't remember the last time that there's been these many quarterbacks that all have at least potential to start. I mean, at least 4 guys that are going to see the field at some point in time in the next season, and we're going to be super, super critical on them in the first week alone. But let's face it, it's still preseason. They're still working out the kinks, working out NFL football as opposed to college, right? And but they're playing against men, not kids, as they like to say, right? So we'll just have to see how it develops.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously Lawrence and Wilson are going to start week 1, absolutely. Of the other 3, who do you think starts first?
Justin Fields starts first, and then that's followed by Lance.
Do you think
Let's see. I'm going to pull up their schedule here just so I can pick out
all right.
So I can pick out a day. Well, to be honest, I think. Well, I know that this has been predicted by people in the past, but depending on how the Niners do, and depending on how the Bears do, you could see it's Justin Fields, Trey Lance face off on.
When is that week?
It's on Halloween, which is 1, 2, 3, 4,
6,
5, 7, 8, I believe.
Week 8. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're both in on that.
Depends on how the Niners are doing. If Jimmy G is just having a career year, then it's going to be Justin Fields against Jimmy G. But.
Yeah, I think Lance's chance to start relies really on Jimmy G's health. I don't see them rolling with him until much later in the season unless Jimmy G gets hurt, just because I think there's development. But I mean, guys drafted in the top 10 usually end up starting at some point. So I think it's hard to evaluate Lance after one game. Seeing what he does today, I think is going to be really big, because if he looks like he's ready for NFL action, then I think that moves his timeline up a bit. But maybe it's just for a swerve. But I mean, if I'm the Patriots, I think I would start Mac Jones. Cam Newton hasn't. He's looked good too. He hasn't played a bunch, but just the Cam Newton that was playing at the end of the year last year just looked really bad, and was not best for the team. And I think Mac Jones, has a decently high floor, and is a guy who can be really solid. He won't get anywhere near what we've seen Justin Herbert and Baker Mayfield and some elite rookie quarterbacks do, but I think he could lead the team to be solid. So maybe that's not what they want, but I don't know. So maybe Mac Jones. I mean, I think he gets in there at some point, but I guess it's up to Cam Newton if he really plays well like he did in those first couple of games last year. But we can move on to some non-rookie quarterback preseason kind of storylines, I guess, so to say. We're going into the last week of the preseason, just 3 games this year, as opposed to 4 with the added regular season game. So the final game, and kind of, what are you looking for? What do you want to see? I know, something that I think will be really interesting to watch is just how they kind of how teams use this game, because we got really used to the formula, the 4-game preseason formula, where the starters would play a drive week 1, maybe a quarter week 2, a half week 3, and then wouldn't play at all week 4. So now this is new. And also, I think teams learned from last year having no preseason that a lot of guys don't need preseason. Russell Wilson does not need to play a single preseason snap, and he will be fine. And a lot of other guys, are along those same lines. So it's going to be interesting to see if they view this as more of a previous year's preseason game number 3, where starters play a lot, or week 4 where they don't play at all, and where it's just guys like looking to make the roster. So there's kind of two. I don't know. Who's going to play or how much they're going to play. So that's hard to know. But after that, what are you kind of looking for?
It's kind of related to what you're saying about following a formula for so many years. So now that there's 17 games in the regular season, just the 3 games in the preseason, I know the initial reaction from players for good portion of the reactions were, they get the added game, but now that means, now I got to suit up for another game in the season. I understand what you're saying about the 4th preseason game being kind of a blow-off game, or put the 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, it was for guys fighting to make the roster, not guys fighting for starting spots. Yeah.
So that being said, they're losing a preseason game, right? So they're only going to have 3. It's just like what you said about Russell Wilson not needing to have a preseason. Tom Brady doesn't need a preseason. Aaron Rodgers doesn't need one.
No.
There's numerous stars in the league that will not even touch the field during the preseason. So taking that and going into week 3, if they're really going to prepare for this rigorous season that is just one more game, I would picture that week 3 of the preseason is going to be, I would say, lackluster in terms of the energy department.
Probably.
This is probably not going to look far off of a spring game in college.
Yeah, not a lot of big names.
It's not going to be a lot of big names. There's not going to be, there might be some people really playing their butts off, the 4th string outside linebacker who's trying to make special teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, for sure.
In terms of the quarterbacks, they're going to be doing they'll be following their plays, going through the progression. They're not going to be, it's not that preseason's really competitive in the first place, but it's going to look like a practice, excuse me. It's going to look like a scrimmage. It's going to look like, that's what it typically looks like, but especially now if it's the final preseason game and it's just the 3rd one that they're going to have, and knowing that they're going to have to stretch their energy another game for the next year, regardless of how I think stretching the regular season an extra game is not too much to really like stretch out their energy levels of. I'm not an NFL player. I couldn't really tell you from personal experience, but
yeah,
this is going to be a pretty lackluster week in terms of the people who are out there, in terms of the plays that they're calling. For the most part, I believe I know the Seahawks, for the most part, week 4 of the preseason, they always played the Raiders, or they always play the Raiders in every single preseason, basically. And every team, I think, has kind of one of those teams, if I'm not mistaken. So don't know because considering the Seahawks played the Raiders in the first week of the preseason, and I'm used to it being kind of the last week.
I believe they play the Chargers.
Chargers in the 3rd week. So it's just going to be I don't even want to say it's going to be interesting. You know what I mean? It's like probably even the first round selections in the quarterback class, I'd be surprised if any of them play a drive, to be honest. Especially like Trevor Lawrence, there's no way. Zach Wilson, you got what you came for. Go sit down. You're gonna go play next week. Even Trey Lance, maybe like you said, if Trey Lance has a big game tonight and has something to prove in week 3 to maybe take over for Jimmy G, that's something. But like, I'd be surprised if the Patriots put out Mac Jones.
Oh, they will.
But what's the point to do? Sure, it's more reps, but you're really not getting that much of a game.
Yeah, but unless they've decided that, unless the Patriots or the Bears decide that Justin Fields or Mac Jones is going to start, then they're going to play him just, to get more of a look at him, because at this point, if the plan is, all right, let Andy Dalton play 4 games and then we'll see where Justin Fields comes in, you get no more live reps really in between now and then. So, I think those guys are going to play just because, you need to get a look at them. And, there are some guys that are going to play. Is there anybody that, because I've got one guy that I think is worth monitoring, but are there any guys that, the will play that you have your eyes on?
That will play in the preseason, the final week of the preseason?
Week? Yeah.
In terms of first-round quarterbacks, or just anybody?
No, just anybody. I'm going to assume that, like, the stars won't play.
Right.
But, like, I think guys that are, like, just kind of, like, like, take, for example, the Denver Broncos, like Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock are both going to play because it's a, quarterback battle. Like, guys like that are going to play. Young-ish guys are going to play.
Maybe Joe Flacco will play. There you go.
Joe Flacco will play, and it'll be bad again. But because
you'll probably
know my guy.
Travis Etienne's going to be out there, and Najee Harris will be out there, and you'll see every single receiver from the draft class. I'm sure. It's harder for me to picture it on a quarterback standpoint because they're trying to protect them more than any other position, and especially if you're the Niners, you're trying to protect Trey Lance. So it would shock me if I see a ton of first-round quarterbacks playing that final week. I can think of maybe 2, and that would possibly be Mac Jones and it would possibly be Trey Lance.
Yeah. I think the way they protect him is with the play calling and just get the ball out quick, don't do a lot of crazy stuff, don't have him running around, and, maybe they'll play a quarter or a half or whatever. But the guy that I am looking forward to kind of seeing how they do is a first-round quarterback from the year before, and that's Tua Tagovailoa, because he's looked really good in the preseason so far. This is a guy who, was drafted over, Justin Herbert last year, and we saw what Justin Herbert did, and it wasn't, a crazy thing that had happened. A lot of people agreed with that. And, he got off to a rocky start. Obviously, it was a tough year for rookies just in general. He'd get in, he'd kind of struggle. They put Ryan Fitzpatrick back in, kind of a lot of weird stuff with him going on. But he's looked really good so far. 282 yards. That is the fourth most. Not that it really matters all that much. 24 for 34 with a touchdown. But he's looked like a starter this year. He's playing like a starter, which is, really good. And, I think the thing about the final week of the preseason is there's not a lot of overlap between like guys to watch and playoff teams, like, we're Seahawks fans, we'll use the Seahawks. There's nobody that I'm interested in watching on the Seahawks that I think will really impact their playoff hopes. Sure, I want to see how DJ Dallas looks again, but they've still got Chris Carson. Like, you're fighting for backup spots and roster spots. But with Miami Dolphins and Tua, that is an overlap because this is a team that was a game out of the playoffs last year. Yeah, I know they're really close. I believe they were the first team out, whether that's a game or two. I believe it was one. And he's a guy who is needed preseason because he was not guaranteed to. I mean, he was guaranteed to be the starter. I don't think they've got a backup really ready for that, but he wasn't guaranteed. Like, he wasn't a don't play in the preseason, you're a starter type guy. But he's looked really well, and if he can keep that up. I believe they play the Bengals. Not that that's a formidable task, but those could be two teams that are actually, playing a lot of guys because the Bengals, they don't have a reason to sit, a ton of guys because they're a young team. So that could be a game that more resembles, it not going to be a full, a normal game, but maybe it's closer to 50%, of a real game than, a team, a game between, the Cardinals and the Saints or, the Packers and the Bills, that's going to be a backup fest. Dolphins, Bengals could be a lot of guys that actually get some time this year. So that's one guy that I'm kind of interested in seeing what he does.
If it's going to be Tua's week in the final week of the preseason, judging off of last year and looking at his stats now, I will say I have not seen the play. I'm just reading the stats, so I don't know, how this occurred. But across all the first-round quarterbacks we just talked about, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, none of them have thrown an interception, but Tua has. Okay, so the thing with me and Tua is Tua a smart player? Yes, he's an exceptionally smart and patient player. He's so patient. He's so patient, though, that playing in the NFL, I don't know if you've really watched a Tua game when he plays for the Dolphins, but he's barely getting 150 yards passing, and that's just not going to cut it in the NFL. And depending with all the talent he has surrounding him this next year, not necessarily all pro level talent, but like you said, they were just a game or maybe two shy from the playoffs last year. The team didn't necessarily regress in the offseason. It's a somewhat competitive division. Daniel Jones has kind of a make or break year this year, and I put Tua in the same category. Not to the same degree, but I put him in the same category. So if Tua's going to have this big, week 3, I got to see some flavor in his game because I can't do another season of Tua throwing for 140 yards off of 20 attempts and 18 completions and 1 touchdown. That to me just does not scream like this guy is the real deal. Yeah,
he's at 24, 34 attempts over 2 games. That's normal for a game, know, and he's at 280, so he's not going for 30 and 140 or whatever. But there's not a lot of young quarterbacks that have a lot riding on this game in the way he does, and not as much that he's going to lose his job if he has a bad game, but more of can he keep it up? Maybe he plays more than he has, and he looks really good. So that's more the thing with him. Another thing, we talked about it briefly before we came on. But the Colts quarterback kind of situation, Jacob Eason is a second-year guy who is second in passing yards right now, only behind Nathan Peterman, obviously. So, what can you do? You're not going to beat out a guy like that. But, I mean, Jacob Eason has been taking the starting reps with Carson Wentz out with that surgery. Carson Wentz has come back to practice. Does that mean he's ready? We don't really know. And who knows with Carson Wentz? But, I mean, does Carson Wentz play? How does he look if he does? Does Jacob Eason still look like he could come in and not, not be Carson Wentz, but, not lose too much and still keep them, competitive. So that's another thing just in terms of quarterback. Obviously, quarterback's going to be the most kind of intriguing thing always because it's, the NFL revolves around it. But that's another thing, with just how that's going to play out.
Jacob Eason, if he ends up being the guy to kind of take the job away from Carson, like let's say hypothetically Carson Wentz doesn't play for the first 5 weeks and Jacob Eason's playing out of his mind, right? And the Colts are 5-0 or whatever, right? At that point, knowing that it's Carson Wentz that he, may or may not beat out. I mean, wasn't it not? A little bit different of a it's the same situation, difference in like talent level, but like the Matt Flynn, Russell Wilson situation rings a bell. Nick Foles in Chicago kind of rings a bell. Or sorry, the Trubisky and Nick Foles situation in Chicago kind of rings a bell. If Jacob Eason he is a Husky, so I won't give him too much praise, but if he does end up being, somewhat of a talented quarterback for an NFL standard, level quarterback in the first 5 weeks before Carson Wentz comes back, then everybody's going to be watching Indianapolis games because they're going to be, is this guy going to beat out, a former Pro Bowl quarterback that they spent all this money on or no, they traded for him, I believe, right?
Yeah, they traded for him. Yeah, and that's the thing with Carson Wentz. I mean, we don't know if he's going to miss 5 weeks, if he's going to miss 0 weeks. I mean, if he's going to play this weekend, if he's not going to play until October, like that's just the weird thing about him, which makes it so intriguing. And I mean, Jacob Eason he's played well enough to where Colts fans are like, they probably want Carson Wentz back. You trade what you do for the guy. I mean,
Frank Reich, like Andrew Luck though, so they might like him.
Yeah, Frank Reich, was there in Philadelphia when Carson Wentz had his best season, so there's some connection there. They obviously want Carson Wentz to be the guy, and whenever he plays, he will then again become the starter. But Jacob Eason is providing a little bit of hope and some maybe we'll be all right without him, and to add some extra maybe incentive for you and for us. I believe they play the Colts in either week 1 or week 2. The Seahawks do, so even more to look out with for that. And then I've got a couple quick hitters that you can just respond to briefly if you want to. You do not have to, but the Ravens 2-0 have not lost a preseason game since 2015. I believe it's like 19 in a row preseason games that they've won.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah. Means absolutely nothing, but I don't know. It's kind of fun. Are they going to win? I mean, they're playing Washington, who's in a similar position that we kind of mentioned to some other teams where they don't have a lot of reason to sit a ton of their guys. Terry McLaurin and Chase Young probably sit, guys like that, but a lot of guys will probably play. Randre Stevenson right now is a running back for the Patriots. He is lighting it up. He's got 193 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns. I don't think he's going to be the starting running back. They've got Damian Harris there. They still have James White as kind of a receiving role. But if a guy plays that good, can he push for, cutting into, Damian Harris's role, some stuff like that. So that's kind of he's been a guy who's just kind of been really interesting, but other than that, not a ton. I'm not.
Has there been such thing as a 3 down? Has there been such thing as a 3 back like backfield before. I mean, I've heard it before.
You mean what the Jaguars are doing this year, according to Urban Meyer?
ETN and Robinson and
Carlos Hyde.
Oh, that's right, Carlos Hyde's on that team now. So maybe we're gonna get two teams that are gonna run a 3-back system.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like when a guy plays that good in preseason.
The Raiders ring a bell too, actually, because they have Kenyon Drake, Josh Jacobs, and the third guy I can't remember, but
so it's like I mean, I think Randre Stevenson is earning himself some touches, to come during the season at some point, and I mentioned Seahawks earlier. DJ Dallas has looked pretty good for them. Maybe on some people's radars because he did really good 1 week in fantasy last year. I picked him up and started him.
5 years for Seahawks running backs.
I picked him up and started him for a week, helped me win. So maybe he's on your radar. And then just want to give a quick shout out to Desmond Patman, wide receiver on the Colts and former WSU player who's 5th in the league so far in receiving yards with 109 over 2 games. So this was a guy who was basically active roster inactive last year, didn't really get to play much, if not at all, but maybe he's sticking.
The coaching staff said that they're aiming to have him be like a long-term project deal.
Yeah, and so that I surely think T.Y. Hilton won't be there forever, and they've got some other young guys. But they drafted him. They kept him around. He's playing well now, so maybe similarly to Stevenson, he's earning himself some play in the regular season at some point.